The 6th seed last year won 49 games in the Western Conference. What needs to happen then for them to somehow stay out of the play-in? Welcome into Clippers Talk, 4th episode so far this week. I'm your host, Adam Oslin. Appreciate all the new viewers, the new listeners. We're still a podcast. People are asking about that. You can still find it on Spotify, iTunes, iHeart, wherever you consume just your podcasting. But now there's a YouTube as well. Started this about 3 weeks ago. Almost up to 2K followers. I am shocked as well. I appreciate everyone. And I think it's because not me, but the great guests we have had on, including this man who's joining me today. You find him at LA Clippers Film on X and Twitter. We had his brother on last week. And like his brother and like Coach Lou, this man also has a beautiful basketball mind. It is Justin Wilson joining me here on Clippers Talk. Justin, my friend, how we doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for the kind words. Nice to be on with you, man. You're an inspiration to me.
Oh, come on. You and your brother, big time. You guys are two of my basketball North Stars. I look to you guys when it comes to analysis and understanding the game at a high level and understanding what it means to win in today's league and how you do that. And I think we'll talk about that here because I know one of the subjects I brought up with you that I wanted to discuss was just life without Paul George, as they're leaning into that now as he made the decision to go to Philadelphia. I was pulling up the offensive and defensive ratings for the two-man lineup of Kawhi Leonard next to James Harden. And I just wanted to get more in depth on what that is going to look like, because I know you know not just the analytics, but you can break down the film, you can break down the flare screens, the Spain pick and rolls, all that. You see it well, and you see it on LA Clippers Film on X, because Justin Wilson is very good at these things. So how do you think they're going to run the offense with those two, and just what can we look forward to? Because we heard in that report that came out from Ohm on ESPN yesterday that Coach Lou already has, 300 plays that he has drawn up that are new plays that don't have Paul George on the court.
He's a sicko.
He's built like that. He's a basketball genius, and he is always thinking the game. So what principles do you think they're going to have out there now that they know this is the duo? It's the 21 blackjack duo with Kawhi and James Harden, as I think Jamal put it. So what can we look forward to expecting from those guys offensively?
Did he really coin the phrase 21 blackjack for them?
I don't know. One of you guys put it up there. I thought it was Jamal. He said 21. I was like, all right.
I gotta ask him about that. That's pretty good.
Uno and dos.
I think a lot of it is going to depend on how the Clippers go about supporting those two guys, right? I think when you lose Paul George, and I've been critical of Paul George, but it's impossible to replace a 6'9" shooter of that degree. He's an all-time great shooter. And, for the past 5 years, offensively, that is a big part of how we get to what it is that we want to do with his spacing. And I think even for Ty Lue, it's going to be an adjustment, because he, more than any player that has come through this organization in the last 5 years, has honestly been the most malleable, right? Like, he's the one that can come off of single doubles. He's the one that can space in the corner. He's the one that, if need be, can take the on-ball reps as well. And so without him, I think you're going to see a way more diverse package. It's probably won't mean that it's better, but you'll see a lot more zoo post-ups, just straight zoo post-ups, You'll see a lot of Derrick Jones Jr. running in, crashing on the offensive glass. Hopefully, you'll see
airplane mode. Let's go.
Yeah, that's my guy. I was watching him on the Rico Hines runs. He looks pretty good. But it's very hard, honestly, to picture how the spacing is going to work if you're starting Zoo and you're starting Terrence Mann. And I assume you're probably starting Derrick Jones Jr. next to Kawhi Leonard, maybe. That's going to be tough on the spacing. So I think in a lot of ways their defense is going to be their offense. Now, you hope that Zoo and Terrence Mann with increased usage can kind of bolster a little bit of a leap, right? Where you lose Paul George, but you get more rim pressure from Terrence Mann, more rim pressure and opportunities from Zoo. But I think in particular, the offense, hopefully you get more rim pressure, but really it's the defense with Dunn and Zoo and Terrence and Derrick Jones Jr. and hopefully Kawhi Leonard is back to being himself that turns into your offense. So you might see some slippage on the offensive end, but the defensive end is where you're going to get more stops, which should allow you to score a bit more efficiently in transition, 4-on-3, stuff like that.
Justin Wilson is our guest, brother of Jamal Christopher, who we had on last week. Both guys you can hear on the Lob, the Jam, the podcast. Save the best for last. Your bro on first here. Love you both. And I do have to come clean. One of you guys came up to me at a game last season, and I just had to play it off. Like, my guy, what's up? I didn't know. You're identical twins.
It probably was him. He went to more games than I did last year. It probably was him.
You mentioned losing Paul George, and there's no way to replace that productivity, especially coming off the year that he had. I think it was you, and I've quoted you, so I've given you credit for this regardless, that said they were using him like Michael Porter Jr. on steroids last season. The way he was playing off ball next to James Harden, whether he liked that role or not, and it seemed like
I think he I didn't mean to interrupt, but like I think he's just a conflicted guy, but like he went to Philadelphia and he's going to play a very similar role. And, hopefully that's a sign of self-awareness for him as far as like where he's at in this stage of his career, much more of a play finisher. So, I mean, it makes sense why he had his most efficient season ever as a third option, being almost exclusively a play finisher instead of like a shot creator,
Would it surprise you? I mentioned the lineup data, the two-man lineup data. Last season, James Harden and Kawhi Leonard were on the court for about 1,600 minutes. Their offensive rating was 119. It's nice. Defensive rating, 112. A +7 net rating. James Harden next to Paul George actually had a little bit better of an offensive rating at 122 almost. Defensive rating about the same. And it seemed like early on in the season, we were looking at, of the four stars and former stars and MVPs with Russell Westbrook in the mix then, who Coach Lue was trying to pair with who? And eventually it seemed like he settled on Kawhi next to James Harden more, right? Am I wrong about that?
No, absolutely. Yep.
So why do you think that was, and how do you think that could translate and carry over to them putting up higher efficiency numbers this season?
Well, I think, the thing with Paul last year, and I'm pretty sure Ty Lue has spoken about this before, he can come and go. He can float. He can get lost a little bit. And Paul George is a player that Ty Lue has hammered to wanting to be more aggressive. And so I think by pairing him with a player that he's most comfortable with, as far from a point guard perspective, a player who can kind of galvanize him a bit and get him going, maybe get some of that OKC energy going. I think that was the idea, right? Like if you're going to have Russell Westbrook on ball, pair him with somebody who's had success with him before in Paul George. And I think, for Paul, I'm pretty sure that's something that he desired too, right? Like he's somebody that wanted Russell Westbrook here. So I think all of that went into play. As far as how James and Kawhi Leonard as a pairing goes this year,
because they both play at their own pace. They're those type of guys.
Their own pace, aka slow, extremely.
I think their pace was 96 when I looked at the numbers.
It really both of those guys at this point in their careers depend on the support of each other as far as shot making is concerned, right? Like James Harden, I think, if I'm not mistaken, career low attempts in shots at the rim, right? Like Kawhi Leonard has gradually lost a little bit of a burst from his prime. So like I think those two together, it's going to be a ton of like over the top shot making, because honestly, you may throw Norm in there with them, but then the defense starts to suffer. So it won't really be perfect. But those two guys, I kind of envision I kind of envision hopefully we see more two-man action with them as far as like James and Kawhi playing two-man pick and roll type stuff to where you can't switch a small onto Kawhi Leonard and that can kind of get the chains moving. One of the things that is like a hallmark of NBA offense is whatever it is that you can do to create that man advantage, right? To give yourself the best opportunity to get the most efficient shot. And so that could be something that the Clippers honestly go to a lot. I'm thinking like top of the key pick and rolls with Kawhi and Harden, or empty corner pick and rolls with Kawhi and Harden. Without Paul, I think they can stand to be, and hopefully, as Ty Lewis kind of suggested, they're going to explore those things. And I think if you're going to play without Paul, if you're going to play with some non-shooters, you can start to get the chains moving offensively by doing some stuff like that as far as that two-man game is concerned.
James Harden just turned 35. Is there any fear or trepidation that they will be relying on him too much this season? With losing two high usage guys, whatever you want to say about Paul George and Russell Westbrook's passing ability, they still have the ball in their hands a lot. And now it seems like more is going to be on the plate of James Harden.
Yeah, I mean, you should hear the debates that my brother and I have regarding James Harden, and the fact that he just turned 35. And I'm terrified. I am petrified. He was someone, in my opinion, who over the last 38 games of last year really started to show like some serious aging. And like there were games where he'd only score like 4 points. And he is someone that, in my opinion, at this stage of his career, you want him to have less responsibility, not more. And so that kind of made letting Paul George go for nothing kind of awkward to me. If the goal is to like seriously win, because I don't trust that James Harden at this stage of his career can do some heavy lifting on the offensive side of the ball, which honestly, with the amount of spacing or lack thereof that the Clippers might forecast this upcoming season, you're going to need James Harden to not just be that guy that's coming off of pick and rolls, just looking for other people. He's going to have to score. Last year, I thought at the high points of the season, it correlated with James Harden being an aggressive player, looking for his own shots. I think when we started 0-5, 0-6 or whatever, when we first got him, one of the things that helped turn the corner was that James Harden started looking for his own more. And I think that's easier to do when you have Kawhi Leonard and Paul George next to you. But when you take away one of those 23-point per game players and you don't replace him at all, it makes it really tough. So I'm petrified at what James Harden looks like. Maybe not at the start of the season, but as we get to game 25, 30, 35, 40, I don't think that he'll have any issues from a durability perspective, but the potency offensively is what really concerns me.
That's interesting what you just said, because I think a lot of people would see that as counterintuitive. They would say, well, if he's playing next to Kawhi and Paul George, he's going to be less aggressive out there. He's going to take less shots and maybe feel like he doesn't have as much of a green light. But you're saying actually that makes things easier for him because he gets more one-on-one coverages. He gets more advantages on the offensive end to lead to more efficient possessions. He only took 11 shots per game last season as a Clipper. I was arguing with someone on Twitter, as you'll find me doing sometimes, at Follow Adam May recently, that he's not going to get up more than, I think, 17 shots per game this season. They were saying somewhere between 17 and 20. I was saying somewhere between 15 and 17. To me, 17 is the max. Just at this stage of his career, even though, yes, he used to do that a lot, I don't think he's done it. I don't think he's gone over 16.8 shots per game his last 4 seasons or something like that. Where do you put him at shot attempt wise?
Probably in that same range, like maybe 13, 14. I think a lot of people kind of, how can I say this? I think a lot of people don't take into account like, oh, this player leaves, which means that this player gets more shots. But like that kind of isn't always how that works, right? Like he didn't take 11 shots last year strictly because he was playing with great talent. He took 11 shots last year because he was 34 years old and he has no burst anymore. He cannot get by anybody anymore. He can't get to the rim anymore. And he needs a ton of like assistance as far as like pick and rolls just to honestly get his stuff off at this stage of his career. And don't get me wrong, he's still obviously a tremendous talent and he's still one of, in my opinion, one of the best point guards in the league. But if you think James Harden is going to take 15, 16, 17 shots nightly, either that won't happen or he'll be cooked by the All-Star break. Because I think without Paul George, right, his minutes are probably going to have to go up, especially without Paul George. I mean, without Russell Westbrook as well, right? Like us for whatever you want to say about Russell Westbrook, he just played minutes, right? He played. And without Russell Westbrook, without Paul George, the responsibility on James Harden is harder and it's more. And like those are going to be hard minutes, right? Like he doesn't have anybody else to say, hey, you run the offense, because that's not what Kawhi Leonard does. That's not what he wants to do. So he can't throw the ball to Russell Westbrook this possession and say, hey, you create. Or he can't go to the bench and look at Russell Westbrook create offense. He can't say, hey, I'm running this for Paul George. You create it. No, it's going to be him. He has an increased level of responsibility, and that is fatigue inducing. And that's going to, it caught up to him last year over the last like 35 to 37 games. And I don't know if it'll happen again, but I wouldn't be surprised because at going into his age 35 season, it just doesn't logically, that doesn't get better as you get older, being able to handle more responsibility without getting more fatigue. Father time catches us all.
I mean, it's a fair point. There was about a month and a half stretch there, maybe late January into early March, where the Clippers were around 500. And it seemed to be precipitated by the fact that James Harden didn't look the same. You brought up the numbers. I saw you put out a tweet for that. But I will say this. I don't know if it was so much he's gassed, he's done, he's cooked, because he did look different in that playoff series, burst-wise, overall, energy-wise.
So that is, I was telling my brother, that's precisely the point, right? Like, he had a week off before the playoffs and then had multiple 2-day rests in between those games. So, like, if you're giving me James Harden where he can get a week off or has multiple times during the season where he's playing every 2 or 3 days, then yeah, I think he would fare much better. But like I definitely could be wrong because he's just that talented of a player. We're talking about one of the 75 greatest. I remember games against Indiana or Atlanta last year where he looked like vintage James Harden, where he'll always be able to go to his pound dribble step back type of game. But I thought in the playoffs he looked tremendous, but I wasn't all that surprised because he got way more rest. There was no back-to-backs, 2-day breaks, multiple 2-day breaks, and an entire week leading up to the playoffs, So we'll see.
I mean, I think that's a fair point, but I'm getting a text from your brother Jamal. He says you're mischaracterizing my argument. No, I'm playing. I also saw this tweet from you at LA Clippers Film regarding Kawhi Leonard. You said, I don't know how many games is safe for Kawhi Leonard to play this upcoming season, but I am intrigued at the thought of Kawhi Leonard, who has to take more of a volume approach to offense. Mm-hmm. How much do you think, as I look, I want to say he was at 18 shots per game, somewhere there.
Which is pitiful, honestly. Like,
for someone as efficient as him. Now, you expect it. It was at 17 shots per game. Now, Paul George was there. Russell Westbrook was getting 10 shots in 20 minutes per night. How much could the efficiency dip if he's getting up, 20, 21 shots all of a sudden? And do you think he will get to that type of mark?
I do think he'll get to that kind of a mark. I don't know if it's in the best interest of him physically, because like James Harden, you want less responsibility on Kawhi Leonard at this stage of his career than more, because as he showed physically last year, right, like 60 plus games of Kawhi Leonard taking a hard 20 plus shots a night is probably going to burn him out. Like I don't want to jinx the guy and say he's going to get injured next year. You can't predict those things, but like I don't know how advantageous at this point of his career it'd be for that. But at the end of the day, when the ball is rolled out and you're trying to win games, the best route for this Clipper team to win games is going to be him taking way more a selfish approach to offense. And I don't think Kawhi gets enough credit for his unselfishness, right? Like he is someone that could hijack an offense and he could do a lot more from a field goal attempt perspective. So I definitely think he's going to have to take out of sheer necessity. He's going to take 20 shots a game, maybe a fraction more. But I don't think his efficiency is going to suffer all that much simply because he's just that great of a player. He's someone that like I'm a little pessimistic on how good we can be going into this season, but I'm not pessimistic about that guy. Last year, once again, when he was healthy, he showed you that he can rise to an MVP level. And if there's any optimism with the Clippers, to me, it's the fact that you're getting a Kawhi Leonard who's going to be shooting more because for all of the flaws of the Clippers roster, you can hide those by Kawhi Leonard simply being a superhero, taking and making those superhero-esque shots that only he and a couple of others in the league can take and make at a relatively efficient value. So I'm so this is one of the most exciting parts of next season, seeing Kawhi Leonard actually approach the season like a superstar, right? Like he's way too good to be shooting 17. Like you just said, Russell Westbrook took 10 shots in like 20 minutes, and Kawhi Leonard is taking 7. Like, come on, like I'm anxious to see what he does. How many years has it been? It has to have been like 4 or 5 years since he's taken like 20 shots. So I'm anxious. That's one of the most exciting subplots of the season for me regarding Kawhi.
I should say, just to be fair, so no Russ stands come after me, it was only 9.8 shots per game and just 22 and a half minutes per game. I want to be accurate with that. The last time, or the most shot attempts Kawhi has taken as a Clipper was his first year at 19.9 attempts. So basically 20 shot attempts per game. You mentioned being pessimistic on this season. I would say you're overall pretty realistic, and this tweet underlines that. You said the LA Clippers went 18 and 19 to end last season. James Harden during that time was averaging 16 points on 40% shooting from the field over his last 40 games. And then they lost Paul George. They didn't replace him. The 6th seed last year won 49 games in the Western Conference. What needs to happen then for them to somehow stay out of the play-in? We've talked about James. We've talked about Kawhi. I think the biggest key is Big Zoo. If Big Zoo takes that step, as you mentioned earlier, with him getting more post touches and more opportunities, he's got to play over 30 minutes a night. That mitigates some of the backup center minutes right there issues.
Yep.
Just where are you at with him and what they need from Terrence Mann, 2 guys that are extension eligible coming into this season?
I can't tell you how much of a fan I am of Zoo and how much it pisses me off that they just don't explore his individual offense more.
My guy, there's an easier way to win games, and it's like, through Ivica Zubac.
Like we're playing pick and roll, looking for switches, and like he's the man advantage, right? Like that's 2 points right at the bat. He has one of the best touches in basketball. He's huge. And on a night-to-night basis, I honestly think he has an advantage to the point where, I kind of talk about like moving the chains offensively, right? Like everything doesn't have to be a James Harden step back 3 or a James Harden pick and roll or a Kawhi Leonard isolation into a long 2. Like obviously those guys can do that, but like you're not going to get very far if those are the shots that you're taking. And so I think Zoo is a way that we can diversify the way we approach offense. And, it's just criminal the way that the Clippers have kind of ignored his growth as an offensive player. And, I was very proud to see what he did against the Dallas Mavericks. And I don't think that was a abnormality or anything like that. I think he's totally capable of doing something similar to that on a night in and night out basis. And it's going to be pivotal because, Paul George didn't provide much rim. And so with somebody like Terrence Mann, who is, as you said, extension eligible, he's going to be playing for a new deal. I'm anxious to see him in a role with more responsibility, because that's someone who can knock down 37% of his threes, and he never misses at the basket. And so those two guys are two pathways, honestly, to avoid the play-in. They've got to have like some incredible seasons now relative to what we're expecting from them. They have to play kind of above expectation, but this may be the Clipper bias in me. I think it's in their wheelhouse, especially Zoo. Especially Zoo. I don't want to put a limit on how good he can be, because it seems like he can make every 8-foot floater, every jump hook with either hand. He's got all of that in his bag. So Ty Lue, I know he wants to. He was talking about how we're gonna approach offense without Paul George. It starts with Zoo. It starts with Zoo. Like it starts with Zoo. He's gonna have the advantage, and the more you ignore him, the harder the offense is. And to tie it back to what we were talking about earlier, you don't want to burn James Harden out. You don't want to burn Kawhi Leonard out. One of the easiest ways to do that is make Zoo a feature offensive player.
Man, spoken. Perfectly said. I have lost some hair pulling it out, overseeing games where Ivica Zubac has a really strong few minutes and they just go away from him. And the amount of times they have said, we're going to try to get Zoo more involved. And it'll last a game or two or a quarter or two, and then they just forget about Zoo. I say it all the time, but I will do that Dr. Dre parody at some point. Forgot about Zoo. I don't know why it keeps happening. He's too good. What does he need to average for them to get the 6th spot? I'm thinking around 17 and 10.
Wow, that's literally down to the exact number is what I was about to say. 17 and 10, maybe even 18, right? Like,
let's get greedy.
Again, my brother and I, we've been debating about this, and like the Western Conference is really, really tough. Like, you're talking about just in the Clippers division, you've got like the Lakers and the Warriors. These are teams that aren't going to win the championship, but like you got to play them 8 times. You got to play Phoenix 4 times as well. And I think Phoenix, if they're healthy, like they won 49 games last year. Like you've got the Timberwolves, Nuggets.
Sacramento's not bad either in the Pac-Div. The Pac-Div is one of the best divisions in all of sports.
Right. So when you're talking about avoiding the play-in, that's a tall ask. And so if you're going to avoid the play-in, you need somebody to play way above expectations. And I think Zoo is the prime candidate to do that, because he has the skill set, he has the size. I'm kind of surprised they haven't gotten an extension done with him by now. So maybe he can be motivated to play for a bigger number, which could help. So if we're going to avoid the play-in, I don't see how it happens without Zoo having a monster season. And like, I'm not saying he needs to be an all-star, but when you talk about the best centers in the Western Conference at the all-star break, Zoo's name has to come up. If Zoo's name is coming up in those conversations, then that suggests that the Clippers are playing above expectations and they could fight for that 6th seed, in my opinion.
I don't want to act like there's a net positive of losing Paul George, because there's not. But is there any area or intangible you see that they could be better at? I saw you retweet the Theo Ratliff thing, talking about him doing the little things and the defense he would play.
Yeah.
And it seems like there's this, I don't know, misunderstanding of who Paul George is on a night-to-night basis, quarter-to-quarter basis. There's a lack of consistency. There are things he can do. A lot of people will say, and I think it's the best way to describe Paul George, the idea of Paul George often isn't reality. They don't line up often enough. Just, is there one area or one little thing here and there that the Clippers could be a little bit better at, besides, lessening the turnovers?
Less what the fuck turnover? Yeah.
I didn't say that.
My apologies. Sorry. I think it's the defense. I think it's the defense, and more than anything, the activity. If you paying attention to watching Paul George play, he wasn't just providing lip service when he said that, like, when they lost Nico Batum, he didn't want to do the dirty work. He literally, his rebounding rate has declined significantly, right? Like, he's just not the active guy that, he used to be. He was not the guy guarding guarding Kyrie Irving or Luka Doncic. He wasn't that guy anymore. And so if there is a positive to losing Paul George, one is that other guys get the opportunity to expand their wings a bit as far as like what they can do on offense, right? Like if Zoo has that in him, he'll be able to display that. If Terrence has a late 20s jump, he'll be able to display that. But really, it's the defensive side of the ball, right? If you are replacing Paul George, you're replacing him with Nico Batum. You're replacing him with Derrick Jones Jr. Chris Dunn can guard up and down a few positions. And in conjunction with Terrence Mann and Kawhi Leonard, you all of a sudden have an incredibly long and active defensive team. And on that side of the ball, they should be much better. He's not a guy who's rebounding anymore. He's not a guy who's taking the big assignments consistently on the defensive side of the ball. So I think we can be a bit more active without him. I think that's fair to say. And yeah, I think Philly will learn that like Paul George is closer to 3 and D than like superstar, and it's a lot of money to pay for a guy who doesn't rebound anymore and doesn't guard the team's best player anymore and doesn't actually create for others anymore. But that's another story.
Your brother said he could easily make the argument that the Clippers got the better end of a pseudo trade, basically, with James Harden coming from Philly to the Clippers, with Paul George going to Philly from the Clippers. They weren't traded for each other, but two players swapping teams. Would you agree with that? That you could easily make the argument that the Clippers got the better end of that deal?
No.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
okay.
No.
Spicy.
No. It's the reason why is because Paul George, again, for all of his faults, he's still 6'9". He's still going to be a plus defender, if just for his size alone. And he's still very easy to plug and play, right? Like you can design any sort of like offense and he'll be able to fit right in, right? Like he can be a floor spacer. He can come off of single doubles. He can come off of like your floppy action. He can initiate offense. He brings way more versatility on both sides of the ball than Harden. Even if Harden in a vacuum probably had a better season than James Harden, I think on a macro level, I think if you're talking about like that hypothetical trade for each other, the Clippers with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard would have probably been better off for next season than Kawhi Leonard and James Harden. Simply because I just don't have the faith that James Harden will be able to hold up for the course of 82. So, like, if you're telling me James Harden is going to play 65 plus games and maintain 38% from three and like 44 overall and give me 18 to 20 a game with like 9 to 10 assists, then yeah, definitely. But I just don't think in his age 35 season that's in the cards for him. I value the last 38 games very, very much. Like, and again, that doesn't get better as you get older. That only gets worse, more likely than not. So, fun hypothetical, but I would probably choose Paul George, not for just pure raw talent, but more so fit.
Were Cain and Abel identical twins like Justin and Jamal? I don't think they were. I'll have to brush up on the Old Testament here. I do want to ask about Norman Powell and how large of a role he has to have to make up for some of the shot making and shot creating. I know he's kind of a catch and shoot guy and then get it and go to his right for a quick layup, a quick decision maker on the offensive end. You don't want him playing with his food too much or taking too long and trying to get into his bag. But he is vital, it feels like, coming into this season. And I've always felt like, while Norm has a lot of limitations, he doesn't do much else well but score. I don't want to give him the Chris Carter treatment. All he does is catch touchdowns or anything like that. Scoring, it turns out not all skills are created equal in the NBA, and scoring is a really important one. And he can hit some shots that are a high degree of difficulty type shots, and he's had a 40-point game in the playoffs for the Clippers. Just how important and vital is he to this season now?
I think over the course of 82 games, he's going to be vital because I think with Paul George being absent, the margin for error is slimmer. So games where you're playing against, I don't know, a healthy Charlotte Hornets team where you're thinking that's an easy W, those games are 10 to 20% harder. And those are the games where you need Norm Powell to just have a 20, 22-point game, right? Where you can get away with his limitations because of the fact that they're like the Hornets or, I don't know, the Atlanta Hawks or something like that. He becomes much tougher to play heavy minutes against the actual good teams, the teams that will require him to defend and rebound and things like that, which aren't his like strong suits. But I think over the course of an 82 game season, what he brings and his value is very similar to last year, honestly, as far as somebody who can come off the bench and just move the chains along for like a 6 minute shift to get some buckets. But the way I look at Norm Powell is this team's margin for error is just so short or it's just so small that like when we play teams that you think we're supposed to beat, those are the games that are all of a sudden harder this year. And if we're going to avoid the play-in, those are games you cannot lose, right? Like you have to win both games against the Hawks. You have to win both games against the Hornets. You have to win like all 3 or 4 games against the Blazers that you're playing. You have to win your games against the Jazz. And if you take care of your business in those games, that puts you almost right in the driver's seat, right? Because like hopefully you punch above your weight class and steal some of these games against these other great teams. But those teams that I mentioned are the teams you really want to lock in on. And I think Norm Powell is just essential to those games because you can get away with his weaknesses against those games, and he can go a long way towards making sure that you win the games that you're supposed to.
I brought up the Coach Lou comment coming out of Team USA yesterday in an article by Ohm for ESPN covering the Clippers, and that quote that he had saying he can't wait to prove everybody wrong. Mm-hmm. Is that meaningful to you? Like, is that something that can get them a few more wins, just an even more motivated Coach Lou? Or is that just something that gives fans a little bit more hope, a little something to hold on to right now during a summer where we're still got 2 more months before real games start?
Jeez, 2 months? Jesus.
About October 23rd?
Yeah. I mean, what is he supposed to say, right? Like he sees everybody projecting that the Clippers are going to miss the playoffs and we're going to win 40, 42, and 40. Like, he sees it. So, like, yeah. I mean, Ty Lue is a competitor, right? Like, he inked an extension. He's going to be here for a while, and he doesn't want to coach a bad team. So, I think with that quote, if you wanted to take that that take and that quote and really dig in deep, it's the fact that he's going to chase wins more, right? Like, this team's margin for error isn't such that like, oh, I'm only going to play Kawhi Leonard 32 minutes tonight. Like, you can't do that. Like, if you're serious about winning. So if you're trying, like, if we're going to take that quote at face value and say, oh, he really wants to prove people wrong, it's going to come with like a chasing of wins, taking the regular season a bit more seriously. And what I've learned is that alone is responsible for 3 to 5 wins, right? Just that approach every night that we have to win this game is because not every team that you're playing is going to have that approach, right? Some teams may be like, oh, we'll take this day off for this guy, or we're taking the long view because we have the talent to do so. And in my opinion, I don't think the Clippers have the talent to take games for granted. And I think that's what Ty Lue is alluding to when he says we're going to prove people wrong. So hopefully that quote suggests that they're going to take this season extremely seriously. And I think that bodes well for the Clippers win total.
When you talk about playing to win every night, is there a way to do that but still get some of these young guys with upside like we've seen from Jordan Miller run?
That's a tough one. I think Kobe is going to get an opportunity, right?
Because of the position?
Exactly. That, but like, with the way you're trying to chase wins, that'll be tough. But like, we know Kawhi Leonard isn't going to play every night. We know Nico Batum isn't going to play every night or play heavy minutes. So I don't immediately see, but that's what training camp is for, right? Like, that's what, I mean, Jordan Miller is doing what he's supposed to do to try and crack the rotation. And I think he'll get by sheer just being on the team, he'll get his opportunity at some point. It's just hard to see it right now with the guys that are in front of him, and honestly, how serious the Clippers plan to take the regular season.
If I told you the Clippers just traded for Zach LaVine, what seed are they in the West? They didn't.
I know. I was like, did Woj break something?
I think
That's
you're a fan like I am.
I'm a huge fan of Zach LaVine, and I think volume and productivity sometimes gets underrated, right? Like we tend to nitpick guys for what they can't do. Um, that one is a great question because are you giving me healthy Zach LaVine? Right, like he hasn't been healthy in a while, so like
Let's say he's good for 68 games. A Kawhi Leonard-esque 68 games like we got out of Kawhi last season. And
yeah,
he's
I'd put him top
closer
six.
to prime Zach LaVine from a couple of years ago.
Yeah, I'd put them top six. I'd put them top six. Like, yeah, I think if you're giving me that version of Zach LaVine, then I'm definitely I'm taking the high end on that because unlike Paul George, right? Like Paul George is the better player than Zach LaVine, but Zach is someone who he'll get it up from three, man. Like he's a bona fide shooter, like Paul George in that regard, and he's going to give you a little bit more of like rim pressure and a little bit more above the rim activity. So yeah, I'm rolling top six if we were to get somebody like Zach LaVine. And he takes so much pressure off of James Harden and Kawhi Leonard, which is probably my biggest concern going into this season. Is like we don't really have anyone else that can take the pressure off of those guys. They have to um, not only be play finishers, but they have to create the man advantage for other people. And like that's gonna be tough on them. Maybe not in the beginning of the season, but as we get towards the dog days of the regular season and we're in Indiana, right? A really good Eastern Conference team, like that's not good. That game isn't gonna be easy. You know what I mean? So stuff like that is where I'm like, man, it'd be helpful if we replace Paul George with somebody who could at least approximate his scoring.
Couple more for you here, Justin. You got into it with some people talking about retiring Paul George's jersey. You said you put out the initial tweet.
Yeah.
You said he's not first in line with respect to getting his jersey retired. CP
Mhm.
Blake, EB, I agree with EB, but 3-time All-Star, 1-time All-NBA, 27, 10, and 5 en route to the franchise-only Western Conference Finals playoff run. Feels like very close to a no-brainer. NBA
Right.
teams retire guys' jerseys for far less.
Exactly.
I agree with you. I don't think people understand what it takes to get in the NBA Hall of Fame and what it takes to get your jersey retired in the
Yeah,
NBA.
exactly.
The bar is
Yeah.
much lower than people realize. Because a lot of guys were pushing back against that, saying, is that really enough? Well, I think for this franchise, it's probably more than enough. He's a top 5 Clipper ever, right?
The way I see it, right? So retiring jerseys is team specific, right? They have their own criteria. The Lakers, for instance, you don't get your jersey retired until you make the Hall of Fame, right? You have to make the Hall of Fame to get your jersey retired if you're LA Laker. That's why Michael Cooper, once he got into the Hall of Fame, is now getting his jersey retired. But that's not the Clippers, right? Like you retire your team's great players. So like if you only have one Western Conference final in your entire team's history, you have to retire the guy who was a 3-time All-Star for you and played on that team and had a fantastic playoff run to get you there. I don't even understand how anyone could push back against that. Like, what are we doing if the best player on that team's playoff run who made all NBA with you, who made 3 All-Star games with you, what are we doing if that guy can't get his jersey retired for the Clippers? With all due respect, like the Clippers are my team. I I went to the sports arena to watch games there, right? I was a junior Clipper playing at Normandy Park, like way before when they were sponsored by like Mitsubishi Motors back in the day. You know, like this is my team, this is my home. But like you take their history, it just doesn't make sense that you would not retire that guy who was a pivotal part of the team's most successful season ever. And even beyond that season, multiple All-Star games, All NBAs, like over 6,000 points. Like if you just put his resume up against the other Clippers, I guarantee you don't find that many ahead of him, you know? So, like I said, I don't think he would be first in line. He wouldn't be the first guy that I would call, but he definitely would be on the short list. Easy, easy, without question. I'm not even thinking about it. Like no brainer is for sure.
Blake Griffin, I think, is first on the speed dial for the guy
Easy,
to retire
easy,
a jersey
easy.
for.
It should be against the Suns on the 25th. Like we should do it like open it into a dome that way. Like that's how easy that is. And Chris Paul too. Like I Blake Griffin, I don't see those guys. Obviously, they're rarefied air for what they've done for this franchise. So I don't think no one would get pushback for retiring their jerseys. At least I don't think. But yeah, I don't understand why he wouldn't retire Paul George's jersey. What is the argument against it? I don't even understand it. You know.
He's called him the B team. If he continues to do that, maybe you have second thoughts because he didn't end things well. And there's a real sour taste currently. You got to get further away from the situation.
Exactly.
It just happened. It's too raw. So I can understand from that perspective. But long term, I think it's a no-brainer. I'm with you. What are you most hyped for when it comes to the Intuit Dome?
The nosebleed seats.
Just you won't be bleeding at all, man.
Right, exactly. Like I actually
no gauze needed.
No. Actually, I'm more excited about the intimacy of it. Right, like I've only been there. My brother's been there more than me. But the one time that I went, the arena struck me for how intimate it felt relative to Crypto.com arena. Like everything feels way more closer to the game and like way more on top of the game. And so I'm excited to get to a game where the crowd is live. And I can just imagine how pulsating and how loud that's going to be in comparison to the advantage or the lack of advantage that we had in that regard. So I'm anticipating that. Like I think the way that the arena is built, the intimacy of it all, can only benefit the Clippers. And so I'm really looking forward to what it sounds like when we've got a packed house and like everyone is rooting against. Like this will be the first time in a long time. I remember I went to Game 6, Clippers Jazz, and that was the loudest I've ever heard a Clipper game, and that was incredible. And so I think the Intuit Dome can be, because of the way it's built, I think we can top that. And if we top that, I think we could have one of the best arenas in the league. So I'm looking forward to it. That's what I'm looking forward to the most. What about you, though?
Well, that game makes me think that still wasn't even full capacity, that Game 6. There were still some restrictions going on there.
Yeah.
I've been saying the exact same thing. What I can't wait for is everyone to find out at once how loud the arena can get. And I made this prediction with your brother, and he agreed with me. So as I try to drive the wedge further between you guys, I want to see where you arrive on this. But I think it's going to get to a higher decibel level than any other arena in the NBA. I don't know how long it's going to stay there every night, but I think at its best, at its loudest, it's going to get to places no other arena can get to. Because Brian Seaman said they had 6,000 people scattered in there, and it was at something like 120 decibels. 140 is a jet engine. 120, I remember Arco Arena when it was loud, that was 110.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's built for this sound and having a real home court advantage, honestly.
Yeah, I didn't know that, right? As far as what you just said about how loud it's already gotten with Brian in there. So I'm maybe obviously Utah can get pretty loud.
OKC's loud.
Yeah, but like given the fact that this arena is the newest of them all, and we're taking inspiration from those arenas. And like, there's the whole wall thing. We got the wall going, I got to take my seat at the wall just to see. And wow, it's steep. It's incredibly steep. Like it's crazy.
You felt like Jon Snow?
Yeah.
I'm on my watch here.
Yeah, you're sharp today, man. Nice. That's nice. Sharp today. Look, listen, I think at its best, at its peak performance, right? Like if we were to get into the playoffs next year, there's no doubt in my mind we'd have the loudest arena in the league, almost by far. And for the fact that you could say that about a Clippers home arena is like still kind of like jarring to take into account. So yeah, that's what I'm most anticipating. And like, yeah, we got to get to 140 decibels, jet engine level, baby. No ceiling, let's do it. Blow the
Laker
roof off
fan,
of Inglewood.
Laker fans are punching air right now, and all sound is vibration in the air. So they're just punching the sound, trying to fight back against the loudness that the Clipper Nation is going to create at Intuit Dome. Last one for you here, Justin. I didn't ask your brother this one.
Okay.
Best and worst thing about being an identical twin. I can't get the Morris brothers on for this one, so I figured I'd ask you.
Honestly, it's the best and worst thing is probably the exact same answer, which is that he knows everything about me. Like, and sometimes that can be pretty annoying, like all of our taste is the exact same in literally virtually everything. It's almost like
Not James Harden.
Yeah. No. But like, I do love James Harden, though. I do. That's Artesia's finest right there, man. I saw him as a senior in high school. I was just blown away at how good he was. But
no beard.
Yeah, he was crazy. But yeah, that's the best and worst thing is the fact that like, I feel like I'm walking with someone who. Just imagine if you had someone else out there who was socialized in the exact same way as you. So everything you experience at the exact same ages throughout your life, he experiences as well. So like you come to love the same music, you come to love the same women. Everything, all of the taste is just like exactly the same. And so on one
condolences
hand,
on Malika getting married, by the way.
I guess that's one difference of ours. Like, he loves her. I'm not the biggest fan. But she's a gorgeous gal, and I met Dave McMenamin once, and he was great to me. So
they're awesome.
Best wishes to their marriage. But like, yeah, he fans out over Malika Andrews. I don't get it, but like, yeah,
I think I've seen him at Zendaya a few different times too.
Yeah, those are his. Speaking of getting jerseys retired, he retired their jerseys right in his house. He would definitely do it. So I'm sure this is going to get back to Jamal, but like, yeah, he'd retire Zendaya's jersey in a heartbeat, no doubt.
Tom Holland, look out. I think that's Spider-Man's name. He is Justin Wilson at LA Clippers Film is where you find him. And he was the perfect guy to close out this week in Clippers Talk episodes, unless there's breaking news tomorrow or this weekend. I'm going to do a Terrence Mann deep dive coming up. I think I'll release on Monday. I don't care if it's a holiday. I'm going to get something else out there. I'm trying to be like Locked On or something, just get out as many pods as I can right now before the season starts. I figure this will be the hardest work. Once the season starts, there's stories galore, game recaps, and really
content, man. And content is a struggle in the summer.
This is cake, too. I just bring on great guests like Justin Wilson and Jamal Christopher. I just sit back and listen and enjoy the ride. Justin, thanks for doing this. Is there anywhere else people need to be following you at?
Maybe in the future, we'll see if we can figure out some things. But
the J&J pod, huh?
That's something that's been in the works for a while. We got to see if that can actually get off the ground. But
JJ is out of the podcast game, so JJ Redick's out. You guys got to take over.
Yeah, maybe I can get a head coaching job right after. You never know. But we'll see. LA Clippers Film on Twitter. Reach out to me if I'm not, and I'd like to think that I'm kind on there. If you guys are kind to me, so reach out. Let me know what's up, man. Clipper Nation,
He is Justin Wilson. For Justin Wilson, I'm Adam Moslin. This has been another edition of Clippers Talk. Love you guys. Talk to you soon.